What happens when Hollywood's most iconic tough guy walks back into the lion's den of daytime television, only to face off against a host who's been waiting years for revenge? Well, buckle up, because what unfolded on the View stage was nothing short of explosive. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling me what you think about celebrity feuds on live television. The studio lights dimmed as the familiar theme music of The View filled Studio 1 Ampere. Joy Behar sat at the iconic curved table, her fingers drumming impatiently against the surface as she reviewed her notes one final time. The producers had been hyping this guest appearance for weeks, and Joy knew exactly what she wanted to say. This wasn't just another interview. This was her chance to settle an old score. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed across the studio. "Please welcome back to The View, Academy Award-winning actor and director, Clint Eastwood." The audience erupted in applause as the 80-something legend strode onto the set with that unmistakable swagger that had defined his screen presence for decades. Dressed in a simple navy blazer and jeans, Eastwood looked every bit the part of the man who had stared down countless villains in spaghetti westerns and cop thrillers. But today, he was walking into what many would later describe as the most hostile interview environment of his career. Joy's smile was razor-thin as she stood to greet him, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Clint, welcome back to The View. It's been, about 3 years since your last visit?" "Something like that," Eastwood replied in his trademark gravelly voice, settling into the guest chair with the ease of someone who had faced down far more intimidating opponents than a daytime talk show host. "Well, a lot has changed since then," Joy continued, her tone already carrying an edge that made the other co-hosts shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Back then, we had quite the spirited discussion about your political views. I'm curious if you've had any time to reconsider some of those positions." Eastwood's eyes narrowed slightly, a look that moviegoers would recognize as the moment before the man with no name drew his Colt .45. "I don't typically reconsider positions that are based on principles, Joy. I thought we covered that pretty thoroughly last time." "Oh, we did," Joy shot back, her voice rising just enough to signal that the gloves were about to come off. "But I've been thinking about our conversation quite a bit lately. Especially some of the things you said about the entertainment industry and how it should stay out of politics." The studio audience sensed the tension building. You could practically feel the electricity in the air as these two titans of their respective worlds sized each other up like gunfighters in the Old West. "I said what I meant," Eastwood replied evenly. "Actors and directors are entertainers. When we start lecturing people about how to vote or what to think, we're overstepping our bounds." Joy's laugh was sharp and humorless. "That's interesting coming from someone who spent an entire Republican National Convention talking to an empty chair. Wasn't that mixing entertainment with politics?" The other co-hosts exchanged glances. This was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. Eastwood's jaw tightened imperceptibly, the only sign that Joy's barb had found its mark. "That was a political convention, Joy. I was invited to speak as a citizen, not as an entertainer. There's a difference, though I understand why that distinction might be lost on some people in this business." "Some people?" Joy's voice cracked like a whip. "Are you implying that I don't understand the difference between entertainment and civic duty?" "I'm not implying anything," Eastwood said, his voice remaining steady despite the verbal assault. "I'm stating it plainly. You use this platform every day to push political agendas. You wrap it up in the package of entertainment, but what you're really doing is trying to influence people's political beliefs." The audience was dead silent now, hanging on every word of this increasingly heated exchange. Joy's face was flushing red, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "How dare you?" she hissed. "This show provides a forum for important discussions about the issues that matter to American families. We don't hide behind movie characters and tough guy personas when we talk about real problems." Eastwood leaned back in his chair, a ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "No. You hide behind a panel of like-minded people who nod along with everything you say. Must be nice to never have your opinions challenged." That was the moment Joy Behar completely lost her composure. Joy's face turned a shade of red that would have made a tomato jealous. She slammed her palm down on the table with such force that the coffee mugs jumped and rattled against their saucers. The sharp crack echoed through the studio like a gunshot. "Like-minded people?" she practically shrieked. "We have Republicans on this show all the time. We have conservatives. We have moderates. We represent all viewpoints." Eastwood's expression remained maddeningly calm, which only seemed to fuel Joy's rage further. "Do you really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you bring on token conservatives just so you can gang up on them 4-1. That's not a discussion. That's an ambush." "An ambush?" Joy's voice cracked with indignation. "You want to talk about ambushes? You ambushed an entire political party with that chair routine. You made yourself look like a crazy old man talking to furniture." The other co-hosts were desperately trying to signal the producers to cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling. This was television gold, and everyone in the control room knew it. Eastwood's eyes flashed with genuine anger for the first time since sitting down. "Crazy old man? Is that what we're doing now, Joy? Age discrimination on live television? I'm calling it like I see it." Joy shot back, her voice dripping with venom. "You stood on that stage and had a conversation with an empty chair. If that's not crazy, I don't know what is. You know what's crazy?" Eastwood's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper that had struck fear into the hearts of movie villains for decades. "What's crazy is a talk show host who thinks she has the right to psychoanalyze people she's never met. What's crazy is someone who claims to champion women's rights while she sits here trying to tear down a man for expressing his political beliefs." Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She clearly hadn't expected Eastwood to turn the tables on her so effectively. "Don't you dare," she finally managed to sputter. "Don't you dare try to make this about women's rights. This is about you using your celebrity platform to spread divisive rhetoric." "Divisive rhetoric?" Eastwood let out a dry chuckle that somehow managed to sound both amused and threatening. "Lady, you just called me a crazy old man on national television because I did a comedy bit at a political convention. If that's not divisive, I don't know what is." The studio audience was completely riveted now. Some were leaning forward in their seats. Others had their hands over their mouths in shock. This wasn't the polite, sanitized version of conflict they were used to seeing on daytime television. This was raw, unfiltered animosity. "It wasn't comedy," Joy snapped. "It was embarrassing. You embarrassed yourself, and you embarrassed the Republican Party." "The only thing embarrassing here," Eastwood replied, his voice rising slightly for the first time, "is watching a professional talk show host lose her composure because someone dared to disagree with her political views." Joy's eyes narrowed to slits. "I am not losing my composure. I am holding you accountable for your actions." "Holding me accountable?" Eastwood's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Who elected you the accountability police? Last I checked, this was supposed to be a talk show, not a tribunal. We have a responsibility to our viewers," Joy declared, puffing herself up with righteous indignation. "When celebrities use their platforms to spread misinformation and divisive messages, we have an obligation to call them out." "Misinformation?" Eastwood's voice was deadly quiet now. "What misinformation did I spread, Joy? Be specific." Joy faltered for a moment, clearly realizing she had painted herself into a corner. You implied that the president wasn't doing his job properly." "That's called political criticism, not misinformation. People have been criticizing presidents since George Washington. It's called democracy. But when you do it in such a disrespectful way, talking to an empty chair like he was sitting right there, it crosses a line." Eastwood leaned forward, his steely gaze boring into Joy like a laser. "The only line being crossed here is by you, lady. You invited me on your show under the pretense of promoting my new film, and instead you're trying to prosecute me for exercising my First Amendment rights." "Your First Amendment rights?" Joy's voice climbed to a near shriek. "What about our First Amendment rights? Don't we have the right to question you?" "Question me all you want," Eastwood replied coolly. "But don't sit there and call me crazy for having different political opinions than you do. That's not questioning, that's character assassination." The tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The other co-hosts sat frozen in their chairs, unsure whether to intervene or let this train wreck continue to unfold. The producers in the control room were frantically debating whether to cut to commercial or let it play out. Joy took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain some semblance of control. Look, Clint, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot here. Did we? Eastwood's tone suggested he wasn't buying her sudden attempt at diplomacy. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you planned this whole ambush from the moment I walked through that door. It's not an ambush. It's journalism. We ask tough questions here. Tough questions are one thing. Personal attacks are another. Calling someone crazy isn't journalism. It's slander. Joy's face flushed red again. I never called you crazy. I said the chair thing was crazy. You said I looked like a crazy old man. There's a difference. Semantics. Joy waved her hand dismissively. No, accuracy. Something you might want to try sometime. That comment hit Joy like a physical blow. Her entire body tensed, and when she spoke again, her voice was shaking with barely controlled fury. How dare you question my journalistic integrity? I have been doing this job for decades. I have interviewed presidents, prime ministers, Nobel Prize winners. I don't need some washed-up actor telling me how to do my job. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even Joy seemed to realize she had gone too far. But it was too late to take them back. Eastwood's expression had gone completely stone cold, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades of Hollywood gravitas. Washed up? The two words came out like bullets from a gun. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath as Clint Eastwood slowly rose from his chair, his 6'4" frame casting a shadow across the table. His movement was deliberate, controlled, like a predator that had finally decided to strike. Washed up, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow filling the entire studio. That's an interesting choice of words from someone whose biggest claim to fame is sitting behind a desk and complaining about things she doesn't understand. Joy's bravado crumbled instantly. The color drained from her face as she realized she had just insulted one of the most respected figures in Hollywood history. But there was no backing down now. I didn't mean, she started to stammer, but Eastwood held up a hand that silenced her immediately. No, Joy. You said exactly what you meant. You think I'm washed up? Let me tell you something about being washed up. His voice was gaining strength now, like thunder rolling across a mountain range. A washed-up actor doesn't direct Academy Award-winning films. A washed-up actor doesn't have studios begging him to make movies well into his 90s. A washed-up actor doesn't have a career spanning 7 decades. The studio audience was completely captivated. Some had their phones out, recording what they instinctively knew would become a viral moment. This wasn't just a celebrity spat. This was a masterclass in how to dismantle someone with words. But you know what is washed up, Joy? A talk show host who thinks yelling louder makes her arguments stronger. A talk show host who resorts to personal insults when she can't win a debate on merit. A talk show host who invites guests on her show just so she can ambush them with her political agenda. Joy tried to interrupt, her mouth opening and closing desperately, but Eastwood's voice rolled over her like a tsunami. You want to talk about journalistic integrity? Real journalists ask probing questions without making it personal. Real journalists can disagree with someone's politics without calling them crazy. Real journalists understand the difference between holding someone accountable and character assassination. The other co-hosts were frantically trying to catch Joy's attention, silently pleading with her to apologize or change the subject, but she was frozen like a deer in headlights, unable to look away from the verbal destruction unfolding before her. You know what's really sad here, Joy? You had a chance to have a real conversation about the role of celebrities in politics. You could have asked thoughtful questions about the responsibility that comes with a public platform. Instead, you chose to turn this into a personal attack because you're still bitter about a comedy bit I did years ago. Joy finally found her voice, though it came out as little more than a croak. I'm not bitter about anything. I'm trying to hold you accountable for your public statements. Eastwood's laugh was cold and humorless. Accountable to who? You? Since when did you become the arbiter of what public figures are allowed to say or do? You're not a judge, Joy. You're not a prosecutor. You're a talk show host on a daytime television program. This show reaches millions of people, Joy protested weakly. We have influence. And there's the problem right there, Eastwood shot back. You think having influence gives you the right to tear people down who don't share your worldview. You think having a microphone makes you morally superior to the people you interview. The camera captured every nuance of this verbal massacre. Joy's hands were trembling now, her carefully applied makeup beginning to show stress lines around her eyes. This wasn't how this interview was supposed to go. She was supposed to be the one in control, the one asking the tough questions. "I never said I was morally superior to anyone," she managed to whisper. "You didn't have to say it, Joy. It's written all over your face every time you disagree with someone. That condescending smirk, that eye roll, that tone of voice that suggests anyone who thinks differently than you must be some kind of idiot." Eastwood began pacing now, his hands clasped behind his back like a general addressing defeated troops. The studio lights caught the silver in his hair, making him look like some kind of avenging angel. "You want to know what real leadership looks like? Real leadership is listening to opposing viewpoints, without immediately trying to destroy the person expressing them. Real leadership is finding common ground instead of driving wedges. Real leadership is admitting when you're wrong." Joy's voice was barely audible now. "Are you saying I should apologize?" "I'm saying you should think before you speak. But we both know that's not going to happen. Because thinking before speaking would require you to actually consider that you might be wrong about something. And God knows we can't have that on The View." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was education. They were watching a master communicate with precision and power. "You know what really gets me, Joy? You sit here every day talking about tolerance and understanding and acceptance. But the moment someone disagrees with you politically, all that tolerance goes right out the window. You become exactly the kind of close-minded, judgmental person you claim to oppose." Joy's eyes were beginning to water now, though whether from anger or embarrassment was impossible to tell. "That's not fair," she whispered. "Fair?" Eastwood's voice rose for the first time since he had stood up. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to call me crazy? Was it fair to call me washed up? Was it fair to invite me here under false pretenses just so you could settle some personal vendetta?" The other co-hosts were making frantic gestures toward the control booth. But the producers had made their decision. This was must-see television, and they were going to let it play out to its conclusion. "I think," one of the other co-hosts finally managed to interject, "maybe we should take a commercial break." Eastwood turned toward her with those steely eyes. "No, I think we should finish this conversation. Joy started something here, and she's going to see it through to the end." He turned back to Joy, who looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. "You want to know the real difference between us, Joy? When I disagree with someone's politics, I argue against their ideas. When you disagree with someone's politics, you attack their character. That's the difference between a professional and an amateur." Joy's voice was barely a whisper now. "I was just trying to ask tough questions." "No, Joy. You were trying to embarrass me on national television because you don't like my politics. There's a difference. A big one." Eastwood moved closer to the table, his presence filling the entire frame of the camera. "Here's some free advice from a washed-up actor. The next time you want to have a political discussion with a guest, try discussing politics instead of making personal attacks. You might actually learn something." The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Joy sat frozen in her chair, completely defeated. This wasn't just a loss, this was a complete and total destruction of everything she thought she knew about controlling an interview. "You know what the saddest part of all this is, Joy? I actually came here today hoping to have a real conversation. I was looking forward to talking about my new film, maybe sharing some stories from my career. Instead, I got dragged into this circus because you couldn't resist taking shots at me for something that happened years ago." Joy finally managed to look up at him, her eyes red and watery. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Eastwood studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Are you sorry for what you did? Or are you sorry you got called out for it?" She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The answer was written all over her face. "That's what I thought," Eastwood said quietly. He straightened his jacket and looked directly into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, this has been educational, but I think it's time for me to go. I've got a movie to promote, and apparently this isn't the place to do it." He turned back to Joy one last time. Next time you want to ambush someone, Joy, make sure you're prepared for them to fight back. Because not everyone is going to sit there and take your abuse with a smile. With that, Clint Eastwood walked off the set of The View, leaving behind a stunned audience, a humiliated host, and what would become one of the most talked-about moments in daytime television history. Joy sat frozen in her chair, staring at the empty guest seat, finally understanding what it felt like to be on the wrong end of a confrontation with the man with no name. The cameras kept rolling for another few seconds, capturing Joy's complete defeat before finally cutting to commercial. In those final moments, you could see the exact instant when she realized that she had just been schooled by a true professional. What did you think of that incredible confrontation? Did Joy Behar get what she deserved, or did Clint Eastwood go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more explosive celebrity encounters. I want to know, do you think talk show hosts should be able to ambush their guests like this, or should there be some professional boundaries that everyone respects?